I traveled about an hour north of Chicago to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where I stumbled upon a couple of the coolest fish stores I've ever seen. This one here is called Best Fish and is located in downtown Milwaukee. It's not the full subject of this video, but I wanted to show a couple of the clips here because they had massive monster fish like this huge pacu, redtail catfish, both big and small. They had huge red devils and midas cichlids, and they even had some jaguars in here as well. I was blown away by not only the amount of tanks they fit in this small store, but also just the size of the fish and some of the rare fish that you'll see. And I wanted to show just a couple quick clips from this store because it really fits into the greater theme of this video, which is giant fish, monster-sized cichlids, great selection, and rare fish all at local fish stores. And you don't have to look much further than just down the street in Milwaukee. This is Aquatics Unlimited. I didn't even intend to make a video of Aquatics Unlimited, but once I walked in, I knew I had to film it. You walk through the front door and you're greeted by this really cool nature area with koi, and then you walk in the front door and you just see racks on racks and racks of tanks. There are over 400 fish tanks set up here with different fish in them from big to small. And we're going to take a look at some of the highlights, and just knowing us, it's going to be heavily centered on some cichlids, but they also had some really awesome display tanks and really cool aquascape nano tanks, as well as a huge selection of koi, which is in the back of the store out in these big vats. So we'll take a look at all of that in today's video. And I was just blown away by not only the rare fish, but also the cichlids. And a lot of times local fish stores will have a decent selection of cichlids, but they're all going to be pretty small. Well, this store had not only small ones, but also some really big adults. And I also bought a fish from them, so if you stick around to the end of the video, you'll see me put that fish in one of my new tanks. But before we look at some of those awesome display tanks, just wanted to highlight a few of the awesome big cichlids that they had here, including a black nasty cichlid, which is something you don't see in stores every day, especially one that's kind of a young adult. It probably will double in size, but it still was a really good size for cichlid and a rare one. And in this same tank was this huge chocolate cichlid. This is probably the biggest chocolate cichlid I have ever seen in person. I had a really large one for a while, but this one is almost double the size of the one that I had in my 180-gallon aquarium. And then they had a few different midas cichlids and red devils. All these were labeled as red devils, but I think a few of them were actually hybrids or maybe just midas cichlids. A couple were in a tank with some really good looking firemouths, and you can see just by the selection of firemouths here that they have more than just juveniles. They have some pretty big young adults or adults with some great color. The firemouths are doing what they do best, which is bigger with each other. And then right next to them were some really beautiful rainbow cichlids with some great color, and I just did a species profile and a care guide on them that I'll leave down in the description below. But it can't be a great cichlid selection without a lot of beautiful Oscars. And they had some pretty decent sized tiger cichlids. And then next to them was a really big electric blue cara, along with another Oscar, a tinfoil barb, and I believe that's a channel cat. And just to continue going up in size, look how big this Oscar was. I believe he was a trade-in, or it's just been a store pet for a long time because it was a big old Oscar, and it was in a tank with a gar that was also very large. And over near them in the corner of the store was this beautiful custom aquarium that was aquascaped as an Asian river aquarium, so that means some denizen barbs, which I absolutely love, different rainbow fish. Just a really unique aquarium setup with a lot of color and activity. It's a really cool community tank that you can maybe do in your own setup, and you don't need a massive aquarium to accomplish it. And then continuing on through the store, you see some other rare cichlids, some monster-sized plecos here. And I think with a lot of the selection, including the iridescent shark, again, these are trade-ins or just fish that they're trying to find good homes for. Some of these fish probably shouldn't be sold in local fish stores, but as long as they are doing it correctly and making sure people know what they're getting, it is a much better process than just selling a tiny iridescent shark to someone that just wants a shark. And like I mentioned, they had a really good selection of midas and red devils. All of these different red devils looked incredible. I really would like to go that route one time and just set up a tank for either 1 or 2 red devils. But it is hard to kind of find a purebred red devil these days since they're so hybridized. And next to them was one of the cichlids that breeds the most readily. These were a ton of convict cichlids that were really small, and that was next to some green terror cichlids, which were next to some red spotted severums, which looked really good. And there were a lot of different geophagus species as well, like the Geophagus brasiliensis. A lot of the geos were pretty small compared to some of the other selection they had here. They had a lot of Salvini, which grow into some absolutely beautiful but aggressive cichlids. And then, obviously, if we're looking at cichlids, we're going to check out some of the Africans. And the first few tanks here are kind of what you would normally see at a local fish store, or at least a decent one, which had OB peacocks and dragon bloods, Venusis, which are really common. But as you start going through here, you might start seeing some of these bigger African cichlids, including maybe the biggest Mbuna I've ever seen. Some of these guys were at least 6, maybe 7 inches. There might have even been 8 or 9 inch. I think one of them was a hap, but the majority of these were Mbuna, and they were incredible. And like I said, outside in the back of the store, we'll check out in a minute, they had an incredible koi selection, but they also had ponds of koi and goldfish right here in the middle. I just felt like you're always surrounded by something interesting in this store, whether you're going through the racks on the outside of the store or if you're meandering through the middle where some of the ponds or display tanks were. And this leads us to the big 2 display tanks in the middle of the store. They had one with some nanofish and a really nice planted aquascape, but next to it was what really made my jaw drop. I was shocked when I saw this aquarium. It was the biggest clown loach, the biggest flagtail, and the biggest blood parrot I've ever seen in person. So again, we're starting to get some of these monster fish that you typically don't see at this size. And I believe these were more like store pets, where I don't know if they were actually for sale, but I'm sure if you had a big, amazing home for them, you could probably make an offer. But this flagtail was probably over a foot, maybe 13, 14 inches. And I definitely want to get a flagtail soon, but I might want to get one that's smaller at first and then let it grow into reach this size, which I think would be really cool. The blood parrot was absolutely massive, and I think people underestimate how big some types of blood parrots can get. And of course, they can underestimate how big clown loaches get. It takes a really long time for them to reach this size, but when they do, you definitely need a large aquarium to house them. And then as we continue looking at some other highlights from these 400 plus aquariums, a lot of my favorite barbs include the Aurelius barb here. And of course, I really like silver dollars. They're really good tank mates for some of your large to mid-sized cichlids. And they look really similar to a close relative, the red belly piranha. And moving on, of course, you got to see some of the discus. And then they had a ton of different angelfish, probably the most angelfish I've ever seen in one store. These were some of the larger types, but we'll see other aquariums here that just had countless angels, hundreds and hundreds of them of all different sizes, colors, and shapes. One of the best things about angels is that there are so many variations that you could go for. Depending on the type of angelfish you go with, it will be a very unique setup and one that probably won't look like anyone else's tank. Then some more of my favorites. They had a good selection of electric blue Acara. They had some Viejas and Spillum here. These guys were a little bit smaller. Once they get bigger, they get pretty aggressive, but also some amazing color. And we've considered getting them for quite a while now. And then continuing on through this store, we're going to highlight some of my favorite community fish. And even though the glowfish tank setups here were pretty cool, that's not really what I'm talking about because it's not really my type of thing, but it is for some people. However, I did really like the cardinal and neon tetras. And then the coolie loaches, I really like these guys. I would like to get some for one of my smaller tanks coming up very soon. And we've been talking about rainbow fish quite a lot lately on this channel, and I think one of the Cichlid bros is definitely going to set up a tank with them in the near future. And like I mentioned earlier, with the huge flagtail, these are some of the more juveniles, and you can just see right away how big that size variance was. There's also some Synodontis petricola catfish in there. I have a couple that are over 6 years old in one of my tanks. They're just awesome fish. And then we saw some bigger denizen barbs earlier, and this is a smaller version of that. Like I said, all of these tanks had a really good level of stocking. You could get so many of the same fish if you needed to. They basically had small, mediums, and larges of most cichlids in this store. And then again, looking at some of the tanks in the middle of the store, they did have some really cool nano tanks set up with some inspiration for aquascapes and what you could potentially do in your own aquarium. They had a planted nano cube set up, and then just a smaller 20-gallon tank here. And then this setup, you could buy the whole thing, including the fog machine up top, which was really neat. And of course, they had a huge saltwater selection as well. And although we focus primarily on the freshwater side of things most often, this was a really cool saltwater section too. It had a beautiful panther grouper, a really nice pufferfish, and your standard reef tank safe fish, including a really nice looking reef towards one side of the store. And like I said, if you walk out the back of the store, you start to see all of these different vats full of goldfish and koi. One of the best selections of not only the cichlids and giant fish that we talked about, but also some of the goldfish and koi that you could maybe get for your outdoor ponds. If you're ever around Milwaukee, I would highly recommend checking out Aquatics Unlimited in Greenfield, Wisconsin, and maybe even checking out Best Fish. I'll probably get back there to do a full fish store tour. And also, like I said at the beginning of the video, I did pick out a fish, and that's for my new 5-gallon aquarium. Let's check it out. So we got our beta fish home. He has been acclimated to the water temperature, so now let's put him in the tank. Here we go. He's gonna enjoy this smart aquarium all for himself. And since we got him in Milwaukee, I think it's only fitting that we name him Giannis.